Early on in the coronavirus pandemic in 2020, the committee of the Bishop Stortford Natural History Society realised that we were not going to be able to put on our normal autumn and winter programme of talks and presentations. So instead, it was decided to put together some Zoom programmes and take the opportunity to focus on the wildlife and natural history of our home area. These meetings have been recorded. They're not the actual meeting, but just a recording of the presentation. So you are very welcome to watch and enjoy them. Are there any dormice living in Hatfield Forest? Dormice, they're a native mammal, but they're on the brink of extinction in the UK. There's been a 51% decline since 2000, and they're now absent from 17 English counties. These two maps will give you a little idea of the decline between 1885 and 2016. Meet the stars of the show. There's Sharon on the left and Phil on the right. Phil and Sharon are hazel dormice. They are rodents in the family Gliridae, and the Latin name is Muscadinus avallinarius. They weigh in at about 17 grams and have a body length of about 70 millimeters, with the tail the same length. A distinguishing feature of hazel dormice are the four heavily ridged molar teeth as opposed to four molar teeth in the wood mouse with weak ridges. In the mid-1950s, when we would take a picnic to the forest on a Sunday afternoon, my dad used to keep me amused by poking old birds' nests to see if anything came out. He told me, "We saw a mouse with a furry tail." So what else could that have been? The story starts with what seems like an improbable situation when dormice are found living alongside the A12. This is 2019, when dormice survey, and actually found dormice living in the hedges on the side of the A12. Sharon says to Phil, "It's so noisy here, can't we find a new home?" So Phil says, "Why don't you check it out in Dormouse Homes for You?" Dormouse Homes for You lists Hatfield Forest. It says it's roomy, well appointed, and there is a first-class access line along the Flitch Way. Here is the forest here, the National Trust property of Hatfield Forest, and this is the old railway line, the Flitch Way. And here you see the Flitch Way coming here. There's a first-class canopy, which is airy and well lit. So this is the hazel canopy in the hazel coppices. There's plenty of honeysuckle and bramble thickets, which should be ideal for nest building and bringing up children, though both these are growing and thriving as a result of the coppicing activities undertaken by National Trust coppicing volunteers. Various fruits are available for dormice, but they are often only available during a relatively small window in the coppicing cycle. So the bramble on the left is available in the middle of the coppicing cycle, and the wild rose similarly. The hazelnuts on the left-hand side and the fruit of the dogwood. Sharon says, "Oh, Phil, can't we go and have a look?" And Phil says, "Hang on, babe. I have a feeling that's where my brother Grant lives. We don't want to trespass on his turf because he's a nasty piece of work." There are a reasonably large population of grey squirrels in Hatfield Forest, and they are certainly competitive with dormice. So Phil says, "Let's have a land search first before we make any hasty decisions." Early in the 1990s, the Young Foresters put out nest boxes in Spittlemore Coppice, and they found the nest, which had been built one of the boxes. It's proclaimed as a dormouse nest, and on the strength of that, Forest Nature, that's our wildlife group, put out 60 nest tubes in the same area with no result, and this was repeated again in Collins Coppice with negative results again. Nationally, hazel dormice are found mostly on a line south of the Wash, and you notice there's a clear corridor in our area. So here we are south of the Wash, and this is this clear corridor, which unfortunately is where Hatfield Forest is. This is a map of Hertfordshire, and as you can see, they're quite thinly distributed in Hertfordshire, and this is Essex. And it says that this is as so often in Essex, species seem to be commonly recorded near the coast. So here's the coast, and Hatfield Forest is a greyed out record, top left. The dormouse preferred diet. Most of these are found growing in the forests, but the distribution will vary according to the age of the coppice block. So hazel is available as fruits, which is quite common. There is blackthorn, reasonably common. Ash, of course, is in decline. Hawthorn tends to be on the forest plains, not in the coppices. Sycamore is thinly distributed in the forest. Wayfaring trees are mostly absent. Elder, just a few odd ones. Dogwood on the sides of rides. I think we can disregard the yew. Honeysuckle is sometimes there and sometimes not in the coppicing cycle, and similarly with the bramble. Looking for signs of dormice eating hazelnuts. On the left, the nuts have been opened, showing a smooth edge to the hole, and these are dormouse open nuts from the West Country. Below is a nut opened by woodmouse or bank bole, and they simply just chop downwards to get at the kernel of the nut inside. If Phil and Sharon set up home in the forest, they're going to be in competition with Phil's brother, Grey Squirrel. That's Grant, and Grant is likely to say, "Oi, keep your hands off my nuts." And these are green hazelnuts that have been um, taken from the tree before they're really ripe, and they've been eaten by the grey squirrel. And of course, they're going to be removing a significant item in the dormice's food supply. Hornbeam seeds are prolific seeders, but they're mostly probably eaten by birds and wood mice. And here's the shells of those on the forest floor, but probably not available to dormice. The annual cycle of the dormice, they are hibernating from October right the way through, probably to March and April, in a winter nest near to the ground in a hollow stump or bramble thicket. They come out of hibernation sometime in April or May, according to the season, and they are arboreal, feeding up actually in the trees and shrubs, feeding on blossoms and insects in midsummer. But if there is shortage of food, they even go back into summer torpor, a type of summer hibernation. In July time, they start to build summer nests, and they may breed then if there's sufficient food supply with a litter of 4 to 5. And in the start of the autumn, early autumn, they'll be feeding on nuts and fruits in preparation for hibernation. So a significant proportion of their year is actually spent in hibernation. They don't breed until later in the year. They weave nests from available fibrous materials such as honeysuckle. The nests may be in bramble or bushes or in old tree bases. The dormice start to go into hibernation in October, must weigh at least 15 grams in order to survive the winter. And there are, in fact, plenty of these materials available in Hatfield Forest, either honeysuckle or the old man's beard creepers. What has happened in the local countryside? Well, local woodland and field and hedge pattern, 1880, where Phil's grandfather and grandmother would have been quite at home. So here we see a piece of local countryside with hedges and small woods and things here. And this is where dormice could have lived. If you compare this, for 1980, agricultural improvements have significantly altered the countryside, making it unattractive to dormice. So these are the same field area, and as you can see, the little woods have gone, and so a large number of the hedges being replaced by great big open fields, making it unattractive to dormice. 3 years after coppicing in the grass stage, the regenerating stools are too far apart for dormice to consider traveling safely from one to another. So these are coppiced hazel stools, but there are big gaps between them, and dormice simply do not like to wander about in the open. They feel too vulnerable. 7 years after coppicing, the bramble stage, the canopy is young and strong. The understory is good, but the hazels are not yet fruiting. So although it looks like ideal dormice habitat here, these are simply not yet producing nuts. The coppice is now about 12 years into the cycle. The hazels are fruiting, but the understory has now been shaded out, making it much less favorable for dormice. So you can see here a little bit of bramble still there, but the hazel growing up is rapidly shading out the dormouse habitat. And there's ancient coppice stools here, and they should provide ideal overwintering nest sites, but there is no understory, so the habitat is poor for dormice. In 2020, we put out some footprint tunnels in Collins Coppice in what looked like ideal habitat with fruiting hazels, bramble, wild rose and honeysuckle thickets. And these have got inky pads in them. and they're about head height. So we put them on what look like aerial runways. Dormouse footprints are seen on the right. Now these are dormouse footprints, these triangular pads, but all we found were wood mouse footprints below. These are wood mouse footprints, which you need almost a magnifying glass to see. But we did find that birds had been roosting in the tunnels, and these are the imprints of the bird's plumage. Though we didn't find any evidence of dormice in what looked like good habitat. These are baskets constructed by coppicers to protect the coppice stools from browsing by deer, and they could provide refuge for dormice, but they're too far apart. Dormice don't like to travel distances. So once again, it looks like a good place to build a nest, but looks all surrounding is a Dischampsia grass and such like, and it's not really good habitat for dormice. Mature coppice has little attraction for dormice as there is no understory and very little food supply and protection for nest building. So here is the mature coppice, possibly 30 years into the cycle. And although there's plenty of hazelnuts up here, there is very little cover for dormouse to come and hibernate and hide in or to build their nests. We mentioned about the dormice being found along the A side of A roads or motorways, and there's no small surprise to it because this is a shrub planting list for the sides of motorways and A roads. As you can see, there's a really good cross section of fruiting trees and shrubs, particularly shrubs, which would provide a good food supply for and cover for dormice. And there's no dogs, of course, no dog walking, very little disturbance, and very few predators because predators will tend to get squashed on the road. So this possibly explains why the side of A roads and motorways are good habitat for dormice. And is living alongside a motorway or main road such a terrible place to live? Maybe noisy, few predators, no disturbance. Habitat will almost certainly go on for miles. So this is a sort of habitat that possibly dormice could survive in much better than the open countryside. So although the forest looks at first to be ideal for hazel dormice, the suitable areas are widely spaced, and the coppicing cycle means the habitat is in a continual state of change. This in contrast to a well-established headland where conditions are likely to be stable for long periods of time, which is what dormice prefer. These are possible potential dormice areas, but as you can see, they're widely spaced. And as the coppicing proceeds, they become less favorable. So Phil says, bad news, babe. My brief tells me that it ain't such a good deal as it looks in dormouse homes for you. There are only a few places that are suitable and they're always changing. Sorry to have to tell you, girl, but we're going to have to stick with the A12 as home sweet home.